And welcome back to the rest of section 1 on anatomy of a muscle. So last time we talked about the sliding filament theory and sarcomeres, and we're going to expand that, continue that on, and finish up this little section. So today you will be able to describe what a neuromuscular junction is, because we've done 1, 2, and 3. Describe what a neuromuscular junction is. We'll talk about isotonic and isometric contractions, and you will be able to explain the difference between type 1, type 2A, and type 2B muscle fibers, what those indicate, where they're located, how they function. And so we talked contraction of a muscle, we talked about your sliding filament theory. In order for this to happen, each muscle has to be stimulated, and they're stimulated by a motor neuron, which is a nerve responsible for muscle contraction. Where your neuron and your muscle fiber connect is known as a neuromuscular junction. So neuron, muscle fiber junction. Each muscle fiber has its own individual motor neuron, so there's a whole bunch of these neuromuscular junctions happening, and together, your neuron and your muscle fiber create what we call a motor unit. In order for a motor unit to contract, they have to be stimulated, and that stimulation happens by a neurotransmitter, which is a chemical that causes a body response, similar to a hormone, but in this case we're talking about skeletal muscle that we have control over. In the case of skeletal muscle, we use this substance called acetylcholine, or ACH. That is our chemical that's released and signals your muscles to contract. In order for muscles to contract, ATP and calcium are both necessary for contraction and relaxation. This is why cellular respiration and lactic acid are important. So if you have cellular respiration going on, you're producing ATP. If you have lactic acid fermentation going on, you're producing a little bit of ATP. And then you get calcium from your bones to be utilized as well. If oxygen is present, we use cellular respiration because it's more efficient. If we don't have oxygen, we produce this substance called lactic acid, which will eventually build up on our bones, and then that causes cramps, and we don't function so well. But with contractions, there are two main types. There are two categories, I guess. One is called isotonic, the other is called isometric. So isotonic contraction, iso being 1, tonic being tension. And so you shorten and lengthen your muscle with the same tension in an isotonic contraction. We use both of these to move effectively. So we have concentric motion, which shortens your muscle, and we have eccentric motion, which lengthens your muscle. And then the tension you put them under determines your output accordingly. We also have isometric. So isometric is iso being 1, metric referring to length. This is when there is no movement. So in this case, the muscles are moving. We're just keeping the same tension, whether we're shortening or extending. In isometric contraction, so there is no movement, so the tension increases, but the length stays the same. So you have more strain being put on the muscle, but it's not shortening or lengthening. It's just holding with more tension. Both types are needed for walking. So when you walk, you have isometric required to create stability. So your same length creates your stability, and then isotonic is required for your legs to move one foot in front of the other, so on and so forth. You have your isotonic, where things are contracted, but they're changing their length, shortening and lengthening, but they still have tension on them. If we talk about tone, so you say that person's really toned. This is a continuous contraction of muscles. This is kind of your resting contraction state. If your muscles are contracted a lot at a normal resting phase, because they're contracted, you contract them often. So for example, your abs, if they're constantly contracted, that's when you can see the muscle outline, and that's why some people have abs that are visible, others do not. They have a nice layer of protection over top of them. So it's necessary to have a slight contraction in all muscles all the time, but why would it be important to have this tone? Why is it important to have this necessary contraction? That's the question, and that is for stability purposes. That your muscles hold the rest of your body in place in alignment, particularly your spine. And so if you don't have this constant contraction, you can have damage to your spine, which is not a good thing and can leave you in a lot of pain. A lot of this comes from your core musculature, your core muscles, which we're going to talk more about later, but that's where that tone comes in. When we talk about contraction of a muscle, there are 3 types of muscle fibers that can contract. First, we have slow twitch fibers. These are known as type 1 fibers. That was a really bad line. Slow twitch muscles are type 1 fibers. They require cellular respiration, and they use oxygen very efficiently to resist fatigue. So these fibers are quite common very prevalent in long distance runners and people that perform a lot of aerobic activity. That they're using a lot of oxygen, their body is needing the energy. And these fibers are often called red because of that oxygen consumption, which means they have a lot of myoglobin, which is a pigment that just makes them look red. Those are slow twitch. So they go for a long period of time. They resist fatigue. They can work for a long period of time, but they require a lot of oxygen, and you're not going to get your knee-jerk reflexes from these types of muscle fibers. So if we have slow twitch, that means we have fast twitch as well. These are type 2A fibers. They produce lactic acid because they're formed, or they function under lactic acid fermentation. They don't require oxygen. They have fewer mitochondria than the type 1s, which means they can't produce as much energy, but they can function really quickly. So things like your hands have a large quantity of type 2A fibers, and so do your eyes. Want to try this out? Try blinking your eyes for 30 seconds straight. Don't get dizzy and pass out, but try it and see how tired your eyes get. These are known as white fibers because they don't have this myoglobin to make them red. So we have type 1 and type 2A, and then we have these nice ones, which are type 2B. These are your fast twitch and fatigue resistant, kind of the best of both worlds fibers. So they get the speed of a white fiber, but they utilize oxygen like red fibers do. And we try to group everything into just fast twitch or just slow twitch, but all of your muscles have a combination of these 3 types. The percentage, the ratio of each can vary depending on how you train them. But all of your muscles have all the fibers. It's just a question of which ones you train to be more prevalent. All right, here are your review questions. I want to know, what is a neuromuscular junction? How are isotonic and isometric contractions different? Tell me about type 1, type 2A, and type 2B fibers. And then where would you find each type of fiber? Where would you find a lot of each type of fiber? Where at in your body? So answer those. If you have questions, please come see me. Otherwise, I will see you when you return or when you watch the next video. For now, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you later.